As a long-time console gamer, I'm starting to weigh up whether a high-end gaming PC would give me enough graphical improvements to be worth it over my Series X and PS5 Pro. Have you considered a video that showcases the top-end PC settings in comparison with the best console version to show the gap? I know the difference in a game like Cyberpunk is large, but it's hard to know what percentage of games look drastically better on max settings on PC versus how many are quote-unquote close enough that it wouldn't be worth buying a gaming PC for. Even having an estimate on the percentage of PC games that you think would look significantly better on max PC settings versus mild improvements would be useful. Thanks in advance, exclamation point. So I'm going to give you this question initially, John, because you've actually shifted quite a lot of your gaming time over from console to PC.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
So this is an interesting topic. And I think, so having just spoken about Pokemon before and people asking about, is that Switch 2? And as well as comments that you often read from different people, there is a huge variation in terms of how much graphical fidelity and fluidity affects the experience for people. So I think it's a very personal thing in that perspective. For me, it's something I can very easily notice. I can accept console limitations for sure, but it's hard not to, as somebody very sensitive to these things, it's hard not to find PC gaming especially appealing these days, because you do get that extra fidelity. But part of that, it's not just the PC itself. You have to spec out the monitor correctly, or play on a TV, whatever. I was using LCD monitors on my PC setup for years, as I think most people tended to do, because that was really the only good option. It was this mix of, upgrading my PC at an opportune moment, combined with shifting towards an OLED monitor on the screen. That basically changed everything for me, right? Once you have a display that's essentially that good, like a really high quality OLED screen, like it pulls you in. It's just amazing. It really allows the system to shine. And yeah, you can of course crank things up, but it's also that freedom to sort of dial in your experience as you want. And also mouse and keyboard. If you're into mouse and keyboard, I think that matters as well, especially in front of a large monitor. But it really is just all down to this personal preference thing. And whether if you're somebody that wants to get in there and fiddle a little bit, and you're like, you know what, I would love to have 120 FPS or more FPS on these games, then yeah, it's absolutely worth it. But if you're somebody that's saying, is this footage of Pokemon from the Switch 2? I honestly don't think you would benefit at all from a PC. You would end up just being frustrated by it. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's it. You've got to ask yourself these questions when considering spending this kind of money, because it is true. Also, PC gaming is more expensive again. It is possible to get in with entry level components for sure. But like, if you're really building good machines now, you're going to spend a lot, and it's a lot more than you would have spent 10 years ago. Like there was that not necessarily golden age, but there was this period, I would say, started because of PS360 being so sluggish, where you just kind of anticipated, PC games are just going to look and run better every time. And that was usually the case. But that's shifted a bit now, where it's a little bit more tricky with in terms of hardware pricing and the GPU stuff and availability, that it does start to get a little trickier, I think. But still, fundamentally, it comes down to that individual user and whether they want to pursue this or not.
Mm-hmm. Oliver, I'm curious about your opinion on this.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting concept and possibly an interesting idea for a video.
Yeah.
I would say it really depends on the games that you want to play. Like, I think the big improvements to me, at least in my mind, largely come in games with bad high performance modes with questionable image quality or poor visual settings, or games that have big ray tracing enhancements on PC, right? So, but it's going to depend a lot on the game, right? A title like Dragon Age the Veilguard might look really good on consoles and really good on PC, and in that case, do you really want to fork out the extra money if you're really interested in playing games like Dragon Age the Veilguard? Maybe not. But if you're interested in playing titles like Indiana Jones, say, or Alan Wake 2, you're going to get a massively better experience on PC. In my own experience, I'm really looking forward to playing the new Doom game, Doom the Dark Ages. and probably replaying it quite a few times. And I'll probably do that on PC with max settings. But I've not really been that interested in other games that have really advanced ray tracing features on PC, like Black Myth Wukong, for instance, or the aforementioned titles I mentioned earlier. So I think it's going to come down to what your personal preference is, and if the kinds of games you like to play, and indeed the specific titles you like to play, if those fare really well on console, or if they tend to be a bit more messy. I think it's going to come down a lot to those kinds of factors. But yeah, in general, I think there are big advantages to playing on PC at the moment, but it's very game specific as to whether those advantages are really like transformative advantages, or just like iterative advantages that are like really nice to have, but not necessarily game changing.
Right. Yep. I get where you're coming from here. I think there's a lot of background to this that I'd like to cover, which is specifically to get that high-end experience. Sometimes it's just not possible. I think people are going to be struggling with Monster Hunter Worlds, for example. Whereas on the console, it's not great, but it's okay, particularly on PS5 Pro, right, Oliver? It's kind of acceptable. Whereas on PC, some of the stuff I saw in Alex's video made me want to call the police, quite frankly. So basically, there's a lot of fuss that's just solved by being on a console. And, the concept of, I'm having trouble imagining, for example, having a living room PC and then having to sort of, fiddle about with settings to get an optimal experience in that particular environment. It's a lot easier for me. I can picturing it, for example, here in my office where, I've got a mouse and keyboard right in front of me and the screen's right in front of me. And, I can easily dip out to Windows to load up something like Viva Tuner or whatever, just that entire environment is completely different to what happens on a console. So I still think there is a lot to be said just for the concept of as close to plug and play as you can get in the current era is still with a console, right? In terms of the actual quality of the experience, there's a couple of things to this. First of all, particularly in a CPU-bound scenario, you do have the ability to just power past some of the problems the consoles have. But that is mitigated by the fact that you might have stutter struggle. You might have shader compilation issues. It's really not sort of cut and dried as to whether the high-end experience is anything more than improved visuals in that regard. What I do think, though, is that, when you do have a PC game set up well and running well, you get a wealth of opportunities that just aren't there on consoles. For example, you will basically have much more of a chance of getting to 60 FPS or much, much higher, especially with multi-frame generation, which I think is pretty good. You have this experience now where you can have like path traced visuals. That's not ever going to happen on a console in the current generation, right? And all of this stuff is really nice to have, right? So there are high end experiences, and there are specific titles where I can recognize there are limitations on consoles that I can power past on PC. I recognize that there are much more options, much more chance for frame generation, path trace visuals, just the concept of things looking smooth and running seemingly rather well on a 120 hertz TV is much more of an opportunity than you'd have on PC. So, yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think there is probably a good video in it. The thing is, though, one thing that I have noticed, and I don't know whether you guys agree with me or not, but the high-end experience is much easier to appreciate in real life compared to a YouTube video. Because when you're looking at a YouTube video, it emphasizes how much things look the same, whereas the difference is much more readily apparent in real life.
100%.
Do you agree with that, John?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's actually a huge problem that we face at Digital Foundry these days, is communicating these differences. Because it's extremely difficult to show this in video, because fundamentally YouTube is limited to 4K 60 FPS with its, well, can go higher technically resolution wise, but you're still limited by bit rate and overall quality, plus the types of displays people are watching on.
Yeah.
But part of this PC high-end experience is hitting these high frame rates and that extra responsiveness that you get from it. There's just a difference there that's really hard to appreciate through just pure video. And it does make a big difference. Absolutely. Especially when you're dealing with like ultra high refresh rate monitors. Like until you play something at like 400 plus frames per second running on one of those things. I mean, you just got to see it. You cannot communicate this in a video, truly.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Oliver?
No, I would just double down on what John said in the sense that when you have a game, a really high frame rate experience like 144 hertz or 170 hertz or whatever class of monitors you have, if you have that class of hardware, certainly 240 hertz and above, it's a very different kind of experience that you can get on consoles. And especially with multi-frame gen now, that's actually a pretty achievable experience for more mid-range oriented hardware on the NVIDIA side. That is a bit of a game changer that applies to virtually all titles that ship nowadays. And that is something that we can't really communicate through YouTube at the moment.
It's actually the same problem we faced through the years of talking about CRTs, right?
Right.
Like you cannot understand what a CRT looks like really these days unless you're seeing one in person. Like it's just not something you can communicate. It's genuinely just beautiful and amazing to behold. I assume Oliver has not seen a CRT in a very long time.
No, well, geez, a friend of mine has a CRT and I saw it last a couple of years ago for sure. I can't remember what it is. It's like a Sony something or other.
Nice.
Quite a nice one, I think. But it's funny, I used to have an HD CRT back in the day. Like a really big, like 34-inch tube, I think, at Toshiba.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we got rid of it. This is back in like 2006, 2007.
Oh, man.
But it looked terrific. I really wish I kept that around because that would be a pretty primo CRT set today, I imagine.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The clarity of motion, man.